Hi, this is Scott. I really appreciate our sponsors because they make the show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Developer Express. Become a UI superhero with Dev Express controls and libraries. Deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today. By leveraging your existing knowledge, you can build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. You can download your free 30-day trial at dx.hanselminutes.com. That's dx.hanselminutes.com.
From hanselminutes.com, it's Hansel Minutes, a weekly discussion with web developer and technologist Scott Hanselman. This is Lawrence Ryan announcing show number 565. In this episode, Scott talks with Samsung engineer and developer advocate Ada Rose Edwards about WebVR.
Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm talking with Ada Rose Edwards. She is a senior developer at Samsung and working on WebVR. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you, yeah.
Thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So you've been a developer for a long time, and you've worked on PlayStation, and you worked at the Financial Times, and now you're at Samsung. And we're doing all kinds of stuff. You also blog and write code, and you have an amazing GitHub activity graph that I'm jealous of.
Yeah, well, it shows how bad I am at managing my free time.
Yeah, so this shows that you don't have work-life balance, but it sounds like you love your work.
I do. I love it very much. I do it every day for fun.
So you've written a number of things on kind of the future of the web, and you've been focused on WebVR lately. Do you have a lot of VR machines at your house?
Yeah. So in front of me right now, there's 3 Gear VRs, a Google Daydream, a HTC Vive, and a box full of cardboards. So you could say I'm a bit of a fan.
Now, I've had a couple people on the show to talk about virtual reality in general. I'm interested in your opinion. I have a Vive, and it's great, but it really seems kind of early.
Yes, so we're definitely in the early days of VR right now. It's going through a lot of growth spurts, but the nice thing about it is that it's really hit the web big time in the last few years. So it's got to the point now where a developer can build something and distribute it to a variety of VR platforms without needing to worry about exactly what they're delivering it to, which I think will make it available to a lot of developers to work with.
When I started doing VR on my Windows machine, it seems like it's split into the Vive people and the Oculus people. And there's a lot of fighting about who's going to win. And there also seems to be a lot of exclusives, like that's an Oculus exclusive and you can't run that on a Vive. I hope we don't end up with the web like that.
So the nice thing about VR on the web is that it works on all devices. And I think out of fights like that, the only winner is going to be the web at the end of the day, because I can build a VR experience and I can target it both the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive, but I can also put it on the Gear VR and Google Cardboards and on Daydream as well. So I don't need to worry so much about where it's going. And because VR is still very niche and there are a wide variety of hardware out there people are using, I think if you build something and put it out through the web, then it allows you to reach all of them at once. So you don't have to worry so much about that you're only targeting a particular niche.
And we wouldn't want it to be, separated. Like I wouldn't want to say I need to buy a Gear VR to look at a JPEG. That's the kind of thing we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely not. That if the future's like that, then I think my job as an advocate for the web has gone horribly wrong because at the end of the day, the web is all about togetherness and trying to get and building one thing which works across a wide variety of platforms and works for everybody, no matter where they are in the world or who they are.
It sounds like if I can take just a little bit of a detour for a second, that you and I are very similar in that we both went to giant company, and probably our open web friends thought of us as being kind of oh, you sold out. Look, you went to Big Toe. But we went there to move the open web forward.
Yeah, I wouldn't be working at Samsung if they didn't support the open web. When I interviewed with them, they really wowed me with the steps they're taking to bring the web forward into the future. So they have their own web browser, Samsung Internet, which works on the Gear VR as well, which puts me in an interesting position in regards to virtual reality, because it's one of the few web browsers that actually focuses on virtual reality. So yeah, Samsung are doing a lot for the web. Well, they're the second largest contributor to the Chromium project after Google. Mm-hmm. And they're on the W3C committees for progressive web apps and virtual reality, and they really get stuck in. Before I worked there, I never even considered Samsung in the browser space, but it's been really surprising. It's been a great place to be.
So they've got their own browser so that they can say, here is how a browser should do VR correctly. Almost like this is the lighthouse that you should follow. They're setting the tone for Chrome and for Safari, I would assume.
I'd like to think so. I mean, we were the first VR browser, so I'd like to think we're leading the pack. But I think what I'd actually rather see is everyone take their own different approaches to how they think a VR browser should be. Because at the end of the day, the web grows through diversity. And if one person says this is how it should be and everyone copies it, we're going to end up missing out on a lot of possible variations, which could end up being a stronger pattern.
Okay. So it's really more of an exemplar, and we're going to bounce back and forth as we move the web forward as a group, as a team. I
think so. Yeah. It's definitely, a very, the WebVR community is very strong. We're allies, not rivals, and people from very large companies, so Oculus and Google and Mozilla and Samsung, we're all together trying to do something with the web and VR, because I think not only can VR do a lot for the web, but I think the web can do a lot for VR as well.
Mm-hmm. Now you've got you had a great article that you wrote called A Christmas Carol for the Web Future, where you talk about the ghosts of web past, the ghost of web present. And it feels like we're just now getting out of the ghost of web past, which is, you visit a website on a PC or a Mac and it looks great. Then you visit it on your phone and it's like, download our app. And the same thing is happening in VR. I have a Google Cardboard for my iPhone, and I also have 19 apps that are all in this little VR with a poop emoji folder, because it's here's all this VR crap that I've littered my phone with. Are we heading in that direction with VR?
So the way it's going right now with native, it does seem that way. But hopefully, with WebVR taking off as much as it is, we should see much fewer sites forcing someone to download an entire app just to use it for 2 or 3 minutes. And the nice thing about WebVR is that because a lot of the runtime is in your browser, built in, you only need to download the assets and the libraries to do the WebGL bits and bobs. So you end up with this really lovely experience where you go to a URL and then when the page is loaded, which hopefully should only take a few seconds, you're all ready to put your device into your headset or to put on your HTC Vive or Oculus Rift and jump straight into the experience. And that's the beautiful thing with VR on the web.
When I think of WebVR layers on top of WebGL, is that correct?
I'd say they're more side by side. So WebGL handles a lot of the rendering. And the WebVR APIs, they provide an interface to the virtual reality hardware, such as the controllers and the headset. So, for example, they'll tell you the position and the rotation of the Vive controllers or the Oculus Touch controllers. They'll tell you the position and the rotation of the headset, and the specifications for the lenses. They'll also give you, it also provides methods which you can use to send, essentially just canvas information to the headset, and it'll render whatever's on the canvas. So you don't have to use WebGL. You could, if you really wanted to, render with just Canvas 2D. Of course, that's not an option because it's not fast enough, but it just ties into the canvas. So the APIs, they're still in development right now. I think they're on WebVR 1.1 or 1.2, but as they go along, they're really settling down, and there's a really great polyfill for them, so which allows you to use them on iPhones and Androids with just a Google Cardboard, and they will work. And if you're on a recent Chrome browser or Mozilla, it'll work natively with your HTC Vive. So a lot of things kind of work out the box, but if you're dealing with the WebVR APIs, they're kind of accessible to work with as a developer. But generally, I would suggest just find a library to do it for you.
Okay, so like right now I'm looking at some of the stereo rendering source. I started at webvr.info and kind of found my way there. And I see the kinds of APIs I'd expect talking to a device to enumerate them, get VR displays and things like that. So, but this is something that someone who already knows how to do Canvas or already knows how to do WebGL is going to feel reasonably comfortable with. It's not a whole new world. It's building on stuff that we already know how to do.
Yeah. If you've been working with 3.js and you feel really comfortable with it, it's not that difficult to actually build something with 3GS and then use the native WebVR APIs to make it work in virtual reality. But many developers aren't super comfortable with working with 3JS. Even though the WebGL API has been around for a long time, it's definitely not in the remit of most web developers. Mm-hmm. So I'd definitely suggest using one of the many tools out there which handle a lot of the WebGL stuff for you.
So just to make sure, some people may not have understood what you said there, 3.js, you actually spell out the word 3.
Yes.
JS.org is an abstraction layer on top of all the different 3D stuff in your browser?
Yeah, so 3.js is a library, a really very, very well done library for bringing WebGL to humans effectively. Like if you just try rendering a cube with pure WebGL, it's doable, but you're going to have reams. If you were to print it out, you'd have reams and reams of paper. Like you end up writing an awful lot of boilerplate. So 3.js abstracts away a lot of the boilerplate and allows you to make a WebGL scene using JavaScript, which a developer might be more comfortable with.
Yeah, I'm looking at this right now, and I almost feel like when I look at examples of 3D libraries like this, the examples are themselves more impressive than anything I see on the web. Like, I'm not, you don't see this stuff at like a news site or wandering around the web. It feels like it's at a beginning stage, because otherwise I would have bumped into things that were amazing like this, just browsing the web regularly. There's
lots of APIs like that actually, which have been around for a long time and are very powerful, but haven't, I don't think, received aren't as impressive as they could be, like in the way they've been used. And I think VR is making us rethink a lot of APIs in entirely new ways. For example, recently I built a virtual reality app for a conference, and so as well as doing the 3D rendering of WebGL, and it looked very pretty, I used WebSockets to keep the entire audience synchronized amongst one another, so that they're able to see each other in virtual space and see me as well, and see 3D slides where I'm just bringing content into existence in front of them. I think it worked pretty well, and it managed to keep over 100 people synced all at once and not fail. So, I think we're going to see a lot more stuff like that. And another thing as well, which I really like, is the WebRTC APIs. So normally they're used for stuff like Hangouts or video conferencing. But now I think we're going to see a lot more use of people talking to each other in virtual reality, where their voice is being sent via WebRTC and their position data or the data associated with their controllers or any of their virtual reality input devices are all going to be sent via WebRTC data channels. So I think there's going to be some cool stuff coming out of unexpected areas.
If you don't mind my asking, when you put that together, how hard was that? Like, the barrier for me seems immense. Like, it would take me weeks to build something like that.
So I built that in 4 days. So
oh, wow.
The environment I built using a library called A-Frame, which allows you to mark up a 3D scene using WebGL, but you don't have to write any JavaScript. You just mark it up using custom HTML elements. And then to be honest, the syncing bit was quite easy. I took a user's position and rotation data. I stored it into array buffer and sent that up to the server as raw byte data. And the server just concatenated everyone's raw byte data and sent it back down again, and people just rebuilt, placed other people's avatars in the same place where they were in the scene. And because A-Frame uses custom HTML elements, I was able to use JavaScript I was really familiar with, so .inner HTML or element.setAttribute, in order to update the position and rotation of all the avatars. So libraries like that make it really accessible to do really interesting stuff in VR, because it means you don't have to think about the VR aspect anymore. You just have to think about what you're trying to accomplish.
Ah, okay. So I'm looking at A-Frame, aframe.io, and so I could go and say, I want a box, I want a sphere, I want a sky. I could do that with JavaScript, right? I could use 3.js, and I could programmatically declare boxes and spheres and put a sky around them. Or I can do it in just kind of quasi-HTML, and that declaration then gets translated into WebVR for me?
Yes, precisely. So A-Frame is built upon 3.js. So if you want to extend A-Frame or do anything advanced with it, you can fall back to any pre-existing 3.js knowledge you might have, or take advantage of one of the many 3.js tutorials and examples out there. But the nice thing about it is that because it's got this large community and it's based on HTML, you can mark it up and you don't really have to worry so much about that. And it gives you a lot of stuff, a lot of boilerplate built in. So you don't have to declare your camera and your lights and your VR scene. You create a dash scene, as a DOM element. And then that gives you a canvas and sets up your render loop. It gives you some lights, and you can, and a camera, and even a button, which when you click on it enters VR. And then you can use the A sky element to set an image as the sky box, and an A box to drop a box in there. And it allows you to prototype stuff really quickly. So even if you were in a professional setting where you wanted to do a very performant WebGL scene, A-Frame is great at prototyping. But if you're like me and not super comfortable with writing raw WebGL or doing complex 3D stuff, then A-Frame is a really great place to get started. And you can build something and share it very quickly. One of the things I like doing is using JSBin, or one of the pair programming websites out there. And I just include the A-Frame library, and I can write up some HTML, which is a virtual reality scene, and I can send that to someone and they can use it on the spot, which is really nice. And then they can start editing it and sharing it themselves, which is I think a beautiful thing.
Is there any reason why I wouldn't want to? You used A-frame in the context of prototyping. Does that imply that I would then stop using it and move to something else if I was to kind of quote unquote get serious, or could I go to production with A-frame?
So I'd say for the majority of web developers, A-frame is going to be fantastic, and it's going to be probably all you need. Especially if you're doing smaller demos or things with single scenes. But if you want to, like, for example, if you wanted to remake Quake in the browser, you'd probably use Unity or Play Canvas or one of the more interactive editors where you can inspect the scene as you're doing it, and it's much more visual, and it's a way of working which 3D developers who've been working with tools like Blender and Maya may be more used to.
Okay. So let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about how we make this, like regular people use VR, right? Like I bought an HTC Vive for Christmas. It was like my gift to myself. But whenever I use it, I feel like it's a big deal. And that's not a bad thing. It's just like, okay, I'm going to do VR now, and I got to plug this big headset in, and it's got 3 giant long cables, and there's things that are mounted on the wall so I can walk around. Sometimes I boot up, I use Steam or Steam VR to talk to it, and sometimes it isn't detected, and there's firmware updates. There's a sense that it's not like you just jump into VR and jump out. There's administrative boot up time. But you don't see that with like a Gear VR. You put your phone in a slot and you're in. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's essentially the advantage mobile VR has over desktop VR right now. Because HTC Vive and Oculus are incredibly powerful and you'll get brilliant stuff. But if but the majority of users either don't have the hardware or don't have the time or just aren't in the right place. Whereas a lot of people will have their phone on them. Or may have a Gear VR more accessible. So they can just pop it in. And the nice thing I like is Google Cardboard, which is fantastic for getting people started, because I can bring a Gear VR, I can bring a cardboard to someone, I'll show it to them, show them some VR, and then I can leave the cardboard with them to carry on doing VR stuff with their own phone, because they're not massively expensive, and leaving one here or there is just my way of getting VR out there a bit more. In fact, at the conference I gave, which I mentioned earlier with the VR people, Google were kind enough to donate 100 cardboards for us, so that everyone there got a cardboard and they could have a go and see what WebVR could do for them. And then they were already set for working in virtual reality because they already had the smartphone and the Google Cardboard, and they could get started right there.
So what do we lose? Like, what is the distance between a $700 VR headset and a super fancy, video card, all of which I had to slowly build up. It took me a year basically to like upgrade my computer until I was ready to get a Vive, versus taking an existing Samsung phone I have and getting Gear VR. What's the distance in quality? What am I losing?
So partly what you're losing is just is visual fidelity. You simply, like my S7 might be a fantastically fast phone, but it's not going to push out anywhere near as many polygons as my NVIDIA 1080 graphics card. Sorry, I'm boasting about my graphics card there. It's in raw power, it's not there. You're also losing the ability to do positional tracking as well, because HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift both give you some kind of limited positional tracking, so you can walk around in a space. But with the Gear VR and the Daydream and the Google Cardboard, you're restricted to only rotational data, so you can't walk around, but you can look around. And for most people who are doing VR for the first time, that is plenty incredible. But I would love to see more positional tracking done in the future. But there's a great quote which which I love with regards to this, because there's a lot of people who think that because mobile phones can't render as many polygons, it won't be as accurate, therefore as immersive. But if visual fidelity was all that mattered, we'd be watching Blu-rays right now and not Netflix.
So this is like a really kind of intense virtual reality version of the 80-20 rule. Like 80% is pretty fine. Like we shouldn't feel bad about that at all.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
I don't know if you remember, but there was a time when Walkmans came out and people said, no one's going to do that. No one's going to wear headphones around like in public. That would be completely inappropriate to do that in public. And now we have people walking down the street, literally talking to themselves. And we wonder, like, are you someone who's disturbed, or are you just on a Bluetooth? Do you think, like right now, I would feel awkward putting on VR and sitting on a train. That just seems weird. Is that just generational? Do I just need to die off before that will be okay publicly?
Definitely not. I do occasionally see the odd person wearing a VR headset on the train or at the airport, and I'd be lying if I said occasionally that wasn't me. But because sometimes it's nice just to sit in a cinema all by yourself. But right now the hardware is big. The hardware is chunky. Like using a VR headset now is like using a mobile phone in the 80s. It's this massive chunky thing which you look silly using it, but you think you're really cool. But as the technology gets better, I think we're going to see a lot more acceptance of people just being like, okay, you're putting on your headset, especially if the headset looks semi-stylish or is more integrated into one's lifestyle. But I don't think we're going to see this with VR specifically. I think I can see VR staying something that exists in the home. But I think augmented reality will end up eventually being on the street. I think right now that's just inevitable. And fortunately, VR and WebVR is a great way to start working with building virtual reality interfaces and planning for the augmented reality future, which hopefully won't be too far off.
You feel like it's a hardware thing? Like if they come up with a cool way to beam the light directly into the back of my eye as opposed to obscuring my view and covering my face, or like putting it into a pair of sunglasses. Like if the HoloLens was in Buddy Holly style glasses, then that might be more socially acceptable.
To be fair, I think the moment Apple do something, people are going to accept it because like stuff which Apple do, people seem to like. So I think there's going to be like a big boost there. And I can also see it happening when it just becomes too cool that you're not embarrassed of doing it in public. Like when it becomes too useful that you can't put it down. Because, like, if you remember in the early days of mobile phones when people were saying, oh yeah, everyone's on their phone all the time these days, like they'd look so ridiculous constantly looking at their glowing rectangle. And, but what we didn't see was that they were connecting with the rest of the world through their friends, through their phone. And I think once people realizing what everyone's getting from AR, they're going to be like, okay, they're just using AR to see their stock quotes or have like the world enhanced around them. So I don't know if it's going to be some perfect use case or some perfect hardware or some combination of the both. But with the amount of money that's being put into VR and AR right now, I can't see it not happening.
See, that's the question. Like, remember just a minute ago when they told us we all needed 3D TVs, and now most new TVs kind of have 3D built in. I think my TV does 3D, but I don't care. We all thought it would be a thing, but it wasn't enough. It was incrementally better. It sounds like you think that VR has the potential to be much more than incrementally better. It's like Snow Crash. Finally, we're building personal holodecks that we're going to carry around in our pocket.
Well, yes, definitely. I agree with everything you said there. And I think the difference is a matter of timing. 3D TV came out but we had no way to deliver a 3D TV show to someone because the bandwidth wasn't high enough. There wasn't enough content, or there wasn't enough people actually producing good content that was worth watching. But with VR, I can take, although it won't be 3D, I can take a 360 photo using my Gear 360 camera, which is just a camera with two lenses on either side, and takes a full 360-degree photo. And I can drop that photo into A-frame, and within minutes, I can show that to someone and be like, I've made this, it's on the web, it's live, and I've gone from camera to showing someone in a very short amount of time. So producing VR content is, strangely enough, much more accessible than producing 3D content. And even though it seems counterintuitive, since VR is 3D as well, you can, if you're doing stuff in real time where you're just rendering cubes or dropping in 3D models or animations, or putting in some 360-degree video, which you're compositing in the background, you can do something really incredible without needing a fancy camera setup or special hardware to play it on, because it'll just play on my mobile phone or on my Vive or anything else. So yeah, I think it's the right environment for VR right now. We have the bandwidth to deliver the content. We have the tools for content creation are there, and the energy of the industries behind it. So I'd put my money towards it.
Well, it sounds like you are, because you took the job.
Well, okay, yes, I am putting my livelihood towards VR. But
that's fantastic.
This is my childhood. Like, when I grew up, there are so many TV shows and books and movies which are all about virtual reality and going to virtual places. So I kind of feel this was promised to me from when I was a young kid. And it kind of feels like all the stuff I dreamed about happening then is happening now. And like, I can stick on a headset and see what it's like to be on Mars. I can stick on a headset and see what it's like to be in a fantasy world or on a spaceship. Like, I can go anywhere with just by putting on a gigantic headset on. But it's good.
That's fantastic. Well, I appreciate you chatting with me today. I'm going to include links to all of your different blog posts, some of the great 360 cameras like the Samsung Gear 360, and also where people can get a Google Cardboard so they can experience this for very inexpensive and then maybe start getting better hardware.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I hope people give building virtual reality a go. I mean, yeah, check out A-Frame and just get building something.
Very cool. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.